Your parents met at Howard University. You wrote in your book that you could kind of tell their creative energy even early on. Your mom, she was tough. You said something to the effect of her scowl could impact you even as deeply as her slap. How so?
I loved her so much that, when she said something, it had impact. She was a great teacher, and she very seldom would scold me. She was very supportive. If she would ever be cross with me, it would mean everything. So she was an artist as well as my father. They were both artists. And she respected and supported my choices, which were, against the, in black families. I'm 66 years old. Back then, you'd be a school teacher. My father eventually became a professor of black history. These are the highest aspirations. Being an entrepreneur or a promoter of parties or whatever it was I was doing early on, that is not something that my father supported, and something that my mother, she took all her last money and funded some of the work I was doing.
$2,000 in $100 bills she gave you, right?
Why do I, you know more about me than me. It was about $2,000, yeah. I guess I wrote it in the book, right? Mm-hmm. He studied. That's good, okay. Yes, she did, and that meant everything, right? That was the last time I borrowed from her, and it was obviously very fruitful and great for me.
What would happen when you'd cross her?
Well, I didn't often, cross her how? Like getting arrested? I was 14, I got arrested. She was just, I got arrested at 14, I think it was, or 15. And, I'm trying to think of what else I did. That crossed me, right? What else did I do?
Or in what ways was she hard on you?
She wasn't that tough. I don't think she was very tough. I think my father was more tough, and he wasn't very tough. He was very forgiving and loving, not typical, I think, of the time, or I don't think it would, if I think about my friends' parents at that time, I think that they were pretty open. They were very liberal, despite, and those years, the black community, rightfully so, was hard on their children who needed help, successfully navigating through the tough times and the tough communities we lived in.
She passed young of cancer.
Yes.
From what I understand, she smoked until almost the day
she
died.
Wouldn't stop smoking. No. I mean, they say, we think we got rid of the cancer. Okay. We got rid of the cancer. Okay. It came back. Okay. I mean, she smoked, right? Like mom smoked. She didn't, never stopped, and she didn't have much fear of death. Watching her pass, I learned a lot.
Like what?
She was a bag of bones, but she's like, I never felt her fear of passing. And I think it kind of affected me, So be at ease, of course, you could be full of anxiety over the smallest things, but death itself, I don't think I carry that much. And maybe, again, that might just be built in you, right? It's not something you probably can learn. But I don't have a lot of fear of death, and my mother didn't either.
What about your dad and passing from Alzheimer's?
He was getting older and losing his relationship with us in some way, to forget stuff, and he was also sick, and older. He just died of I always view it as he died of old age. Mm-hmm. But yeah, Alzheimer's was a part of it. He was so brilliant. So watching him die hurt. He was so hood, like he came from the street. He understood the street. He knew what I was up against living in Queens when it became this, horrific heroin capital of Queens. He knew I was up against. He measured the way he spoke to me about it. So he was cool, and I could relate to him. I could share things with him, or even if he found out things he shouldn't have, he could give me advice that was what I could take. And I was never that disconnected to him because of it. At the same time, he could quote Shakespeare all day, and he could quote all the great black poets, and all the stuff that fascinated him was stuff that was not really on the wheelhouse of most African Americans his age.
I was talking to your brother Danny the other day, and he's like, I think Russell was 2 and maybe I was 6 or something like that. Your dad taking you guys daily to protests.
Yes.
One of which he ended up getting arrested at.
Yes.
So even early on, he was very active and exposed you guys to that.
Well, I think I got some of that from him. I spent most of my life as an activist, pissed off a lot of people, which very proud of. I look back, I got that from my dad, and who cared about others and worked hard to make sure that his presence meant something to other people, ones he didn't know, but ones who, and all of us, of course, we're in Black community 60 years ago, was oppressed as it is today, but maybe worse, not that much better in some ways.
What do you think your parents, having sent you to predominantly white elementary, middle school?
They didn't send me, I was bused. And I think that my relationship with the mainstream is helped in part formed because I was bused. You find the sameness in people when you explore. But if you went to if everywhere you went was Black, it's possible you could feel like, oh, those people are for business. These people are my friends. But of course, entertainment and most business, there's a friendship, there's a bond that's formed. And then you explore new ways, spend more time, and have a more quality relationship about your business and about your life. So there really is this, a comfort level that you have to cultivate, right? And I find it, and that might be just my theory, and it might not be right. I really do believe busing empowered people in a way. Of course, you had felt racism. I was chased by white gangs, going to my public school. Yeah, I would run over to the co-ops, and there were white people that protected me, and they were Jewish. But the Irish gang members, they called the Green Way, in junior high school, would chase me, and I would run to that co-op. And that's kind of like a history with Blacks and Jews that existed for a long time, right?
Tell me about hunting for snakes in Jamaica, Queens.
Well, we grew up in South Jamaica, Queens, which, is many years ago, we had a lot of woods. We go hunting for snakes, and they'd be black and yellow snakes and green snakes. The green snakes here are poisonous, so don't pick them up. But the green snakes there were just garden snakes. They could bite you, you could bleed, but so you catch them by the neck. And what made you bring up the snakes?
I just, something that hadn't been out there about your upbringing.
How do you know all this stuff? Like, all right, it's okay, go ahead.
I wanted to ask you about the drug culture back then. Explain why your brother would call the attic the rocket ship.
Well, that's pretty clear. I mean, the rocket ship. I mean, Danny was not only shot a lot of heroin, like myself, I didn't shoot heroin. I learned to smoke it eventually, but I never shot heroin.
Never once.
We used to say, we used to say that we don't get high if we don't shoot dope. But no, Danny with the acid and the LSDs and the, whatever different kinds of drugs he took, they called it the rocket ship. And I eventually moved up to live there, which is the attic of this house. And in that attic, in that private house we had in Queens, we had on the wall written all of the trips he took.
Carved it with a knife.
Carved it, a knife in the walls, yeah. It was like a door, and in that door was all of his trips and the dates he took them.
And do you think your parents knew something was up?
Well, yeah, they came to know when he was a heroin addict more, but I think, again, there was a level of tolerance in my house. There was a lot of tolerance in a lot of houses. I remember the house in the corner, they had people lined around the corner where they would sell heroin. Like, people would literally line up.
Your dad once found $1,000 cash of yours.
How do you... Yeah, he said, you big dummy, you're trying to break in jail. When I was 14 and arrested for selling weed.
And how did you respond?
I responded by not getting arrested again and being more careful and eventually growing out of that lifestyle. I responded by living up to becoming more like the person he wanted me to be.
But you were reckless for a while. I think one point you were dealing like right next to a police station.
Yes, but that was fake cocaine. I thought I was safe. This is how stupid we were.
Yeah, how does that work?
There was some coca leaf incense that when you took it, it would freeze your whole face up. And it must have had caffeine because people would shoot it with their heroin. And we would do 10 dimes at a piece. We would sell only bundles out of this apartment building. We were safer because we're selling fake cocaine. Everybody else is selling heroin in this building.
And the cops caught you once and literally could not do anything.
No, they put us in jail for a few hours. And what they did was tell us that the guy with us was a really bad guy. He had so many IDs, it was ridiculous. And the police knew that he was really a criminal, and they told us to stay away from him. We were college kids when we were selling the incense.
You had said in your book that you never got in trouble for selling the fake cocaine, but then when I was talking to Danny, he's like, I don't think that's right. I remember him getting
Arrested.
in trouble on a couple of occasions from.
Well, I didn't really get, I mean, what could they do? It was incense.
Yeah.
Oh, and
What
there's
about
one
the
time I
people that
sold
you were
somebody, the
selling
first
to?
time I decided that, yeah, the first time I learned that you could shoot it, I sold to somebody, and then they gave it to another guy who shot it. And he was like a neighborhood heroin addict, like a real dope fiend, right? And this guy put it in his heroin and shot it. And then people were telling me, yo, Russ, so-and-so died. Right? Oh my God, I'm so afraid. I'm walking around, I'm scared. I see him. He said, yeah, man, you got some more of that. He said, that turned green. I said, how was it? You shot it, right? He said, yeah, it turned green, I shot it. And then everybody realized you could shoot it. Or I realized that you could shoot it. And so.
Why would you take LSD every Friday?
Oh my goodness, you have a whole history. It was one of the most beautiful things. I learned so much about myself and how to love myself and how to become a better giver and a more free person. So the hallucinogenic drugs were the best part of the drug experience for me.
Was there a moment for you knew you needed to stop or
Well,
significantly cut back?
hallucinogenic drugs were only in high school, my final year, doing it so regularly.
What about just drugs in general?
Drugs in general. There was a moment when I was 30, I just quit everything.
Why?
Because it was making me late. I was a manager. I was building a company. I was tremendously successful. And I wanted to focus. I just said, New Year's Eve, I'm going to quit cocaine. I'm going to quit every drug, all of the drugs and cigarettes and alcohol. And I quit everything on that day. For years, I would, like during the holidays, use drugs. And January 1st, I'd go back. People say, how do you do that? How do you do that? Well, I spent the whole year sober. And then I'd remind myself why I hated it. But in general, I quit all drugs and alcohol and cigarettes, everything on one day.
Your brother used from 15 to 37. Tell about Hazelton in Minnesota.
Is that a rehab?
You sent him there. I mean, it was your funding that was responsible for it, he said.
Yeah, and he broke out, and then he quit anyway. I forget things like that. I almost forgot that I funded that until you brought it up. I don't want to give you a false sense that I have this great humility, which I don't have. I'm an absolute narcissist. But I can tell you that you should keep doing good deeds and not hold on to them too long. I didn't think of it that way. You know, was it great that you saved your brother? No, that's my brother. That was my job. And, you know, you do your job and keep going, right? So, yeah, he stayed sober. I think I did more that day that we took the LSD and he quit.
Really?
For real, than funding him.
Because
we spent the whole night talking. And a lot of it was about, I'm going to do this. I'm going to change. And, you know, the thing about hallucinogenic drugs and all this plant medicine that people are taking is that it's such a profound, you know, you think about, I'm going left every day, I want to quit. I'm going left every day, I want to quit. And I believe there's this moment where it hits you like, why did I ever go left? Right is the right way.
What happened when you were 16 and you almost killed somebody named Red?
Oh, that's in my book. I stood on the corner and sold weed, and we had a good little corner of people that kind of protected themselves, and these guys would come and rob people and then leave. And I mean, they would come and I almost said their real names. I called Red in the book. They're dead, both dead. They robbed me. I mean, they put a knife in my ribs and took my weed, and I didn't see them. And then they came up on Hollis Avenue, and all of us, you know, and even the heroin dealers, like real serious, violent, you know, criminals, which I was a soft violent criminal, not so violent criminal. But violent enough, we chased them, and we got them to a certain point, and Butch gave me the gun, and I shot over his head, and he escaped. And
but you were trying to hit him.
Not really.
No?
No. And I never shot a gun, ever,
Okay.
before or after that. Never shot a gun. That was the only time. And so that experience is like, you know, kill him, shoot him. Like, oh, right? And I shot over his head and he got away.
But you wanted the people you were with at the time
To believe
think.
yeah, of course. How the you miss him? I don't know. Within the next 2 days, maybe, but no longer than that, he and his brother robbed the liquor store and both got shot and killed. So we didn't have to worry about them no more.
Your early business days, how unhappy were your parents that you dropped out of college?
My mother was not so unhappy. I had a hit record. My father wasn't so unhappy. I was a senior in college and Christmas rapping came out. I remember Christmas rapping playing on Christmas Day.
What was that moment like for you?
It was magic. It was magical. My father was in the house. Like, you know, like, oh, like really. I mean, the next thing we know, we were on a plane to Amsterdam. And I'd never been on a plane, and we're going to Amsterdam, right? And they called me Mr. Simmons when I landed. I got off the plane, like, what would you like, Mr. Simmons? And Curtis Blow and I looked at each other, and I said, cocaine and sex. And they gave us both. This was the president of the record company.
You said your dad wasn't that, worried about you dropping out, but when I was talking to Danny, he's like, my dad was always worried for Russell. Even when Russell had $10 million in the bank, my dad was less worried about me because I had a master's degree than he was Russell.
It was always education first, right? So the fact that I got 4 years of college and, and it did, of course, the experience of living in City College, going to City College, and then that's how I saw Eddie Chiba. That's how I found hip hop. And that's where there was a cultural thing that was happening that was so amazing that inspired me to be focused and, because everyone needs dharma. We all need purpose. We need something that really pushes us and that we can give to the world, something we can give. Everyone needs it. And so finding hip hop put my head on straight and sent me forward. And that was in Harlem at Charles Gallery.
How did Charles Gallery impact you?
Well, Charles Gallery and Small's Paradise and all of it. There was a lot of gay disco, and there was the clubs in Harlem. Gay disco came a little bit later because that's when we started to try to promote records and be in the record business. But the Charles Gallery and Small's Paradise and the Renaissance, Harlem, the hip hop parties, 371, eventually the disco fever became popular. I mean.
What about seeing Eddie Chiba rapping?
Eddie Chiba was the first place I saw Eddie Chiba was in Charles Gallery. I never seen nothing like it. I began promoting parties right after that, immediately after that.
And what do you think you learned from the Rush parties on your college campus?
Well, I learned I could be independent and not do stupid. I escaped. My life became too valuable to risk it selling drugs or fake cocaine or any of that. My whole life changed.
And it was those early parties you were promoting that.
Well, before I even started, I took my last of my drug money and put it into parties. That was it. I never looked back.
It has been said that you were one of the few young guys on the rap scene back then that had any long-term goals. How did your kind of business start developing from there?
Long-term goals is a stretch very early on. I had a belief system on what could happen like tomorrow morning. That was unbelievable, I think. I only reason I'm saying this now because I watched the Beastie Boy documentary recently, and they kept saying how I kept saying, you're going to be the biggest group in the world. Don't you worry, I promise you. And the same with Run DMC and the same with the artists that I produced and promoted. I was confident in their talent. And I was resilient in my support of their talent. You couldn't tell me that the Beastie Boys weren't going to be successful or Run DMC. You couldn't tell me.
And why?
That I had an imagination, and I saw where they could go, and I had faith in them and faith in some ways in my ability to push them.
I was going to say more faith in them or faith in your own ability
a little
to
bit of
get
both.
them there.
A little bit of both, because I could see the roadmaps on how to get them to the next level. Different from like seeing Foxy Brown and Jay-Z or Kanye West or all the other people in between. I was sure that Foxy Brown was going to be a huge star. Sure Jay-Z was going to be a star. I had to be the orchestrator and I had to execute every little piece to watch the Beastie Boys and Run DMC and some of the earlier artists go forward. I had to see it and actually do it. And I didn't have a staff of 8 billion who saw the vision and were helping to make it happen.
It's not as if, you had this roadmap of, successful people in your position, or you had a lot of peers that were already killing it back then. So like, what was it that made you feel like you could do it?
I don't know. I just think magic. You can't fail until you quit. In fact, struggle is how you create a great brand, a great idea, a great business, because you're refining your vision.
The role networking played in your success, you think's what?
In general, I like people. And so if they have pieces to the puzzle, I could dig deeper. I could find what was good in them.
Seemed like that networking kind of played a key role in your success, whether that's, New York.
When I was a kid, I would go to, when I was a kid,
St. Bart's or.
Yeah, St. Bart's. I mean, I would go as a kid to Hawaii before St. Bart's and hang out with the chairmen of all the companies. And I was just a kid. And they were all very nice to me. It was all a bunch of old Jewish men and me. Every year. And Jeff Wald, God bless him, took me. And how did I become friends with Jeff Wald? He said, "What's this rap?" And he was like, Helen Reddy's husband, and he's a manager of all these acts. And he was, like a big shot. That was my man. Like, I hung with Jeff all the time. I met Irving Azoffs and the record people and all of the most senior people. They were interesting to me. I didn't come to get anything in particular. I was interested in what they did, and I generally was lucky enough to learn from them. I like people regardless of their backgrounds, their race, their religion, any of those things. So that really helped me when you talk about networking, to generally love people.
Will Smith, how did you get connected with him early on, and what was involved with managing his early career?
Well, Will Smith's a good story because it had everything to do with how we built Def Jam and everything else. Although people say, oh, those are tough guys, those rappers, it was not about them being tough. It's about them being honest. Authenticity is everything, again. So Will Smith, he hates when I tell this story.
Why?
Because I'm going to tell it, you'll see. I mean, because he's got muscles, he's Will Smith. Will Smith will knock you out. I shouldn't say that in light of his most recent thing, but in general, Will Smith is, a strong guy and tough enough to protect anyone.
By the way, what's your view on that? Because you know both parties.
Oh, I love them
Will
both, and I'm sorry it happened, and I know Will's sorry it happened, and Chris Rock is, sorry it happened, and a lot of unfortunate things happened. I lost friends, right? Like, so many friends are gone. These guys are still alive, and I love them both. What are we talking about? We're talking about Will Smith. He had a song that starts out, my eye. He said, what happened? He got punched in the eye. And if you're from the hood, and the guy is 2 feet tall or 100 or a giant, he punches you in the eye, you got to assess whether you're ready to shoot him if he's a certain guy, right? So I think he got punched in the eye by somebody from the hood over a girl. His line was, I'm going to hold my eye. It was very funny, and it was honest. And honesty was I always looked for.
Why'd Will write you a $250,000 check?
Because he's a really, really sweet man. He left me. I had a deal at Fox, and he went to NBC. And we didn't know he was negotiating. We didn't know anything. So he left. We had no contract. He said, I'm going to have to leave, management and staying over here. And here's $250,000. Can you be more, to us, that was a lot of money.
Right.
My partner said, he was working in the management company daily. He said that wasn't enough. But back then he knew it was a lot. And, it was very generous of him and gracious and good of him to do that. I saw Will say recently we had a contract, but we were never ones to enforce contracts for management. He wanted to take a different path. And so he said, he bought me out. He didn't buy me out. I let him out of the contract, and he gave me the money. And that's what happened. And I'm sure James Lasseter and Will, if they would revisit it, would know that there was never a bond. He might have felt he had a contract. Some lawyer might have told him he had a contract. But our relationship with him was based on us going to work every day and enjoying the work. And so when he left, and he gave me the money.
I want to run through some other people played roles at various points of your life. The first one being Rick Rubin. How about the role you think each of you played in one another's lives?
The way I met Rick Rubin, in my recollection of first recognizing him, I heard a record on the radio, commentating, illustrating, description, giving, adjective, expert, analyzing it. People of the universe, this is yours. Most amazing record. Like, oh, I called up the radio because almost every record on the radio was something I managed. I had all the hot records on the radio. Here's this record. I call up Red Alert or Jazzy J. And Jazzy J, who played the record, introduced me to Rick Rubin. So I'm at Danceteria, and he brings me Rick Rubin. I say, where's the guy who made It's Yours? It's him. And Rick took me to his dorm at NYU and played me all these beats. And back then, we were so beat-oriented. We were B-boys, and beats were everything. And Rick had a turntable full of beats. I mean, a drum machine full of beats. And a real, real good feel. I could tell from the first day. And so I was on a way to make a record deal. I had Rush Productions, I had all these successes. And Rick comes along and says, we want to start a record company. And I put, $2,500, if I'm not mistaken, in. And we put out the first LL Cool J record, I Need a Beat. And that began, and I abandoned the idea of making Rush records, and Def Jam became it. It was his logo at the time.
How about your best David Geffen story?
Oh, I got a bunch of Geffen stories, but I don't think they're for this purpose. I'm sitting in his living room, and he's like, what are you doing in my living room? In the Hamptons? No, Geffen was inspiration. Barry Gordy was inspiration. I think all of the Ahmet Ertegun was inspiration.
Geffen provided a lot of inspiration to you, though, right? Like what he was able to accomplish?
Yeah, watching David Geffen was inspiring, and kind of a roadmap, and also the way he would just go to work every day with, optimist. I mean, I got to really know him, later. It was first just watching a lot of the moguls, but meeting them and then seeing that they were exactly what I read and had heard and believed in. The things that I borrowed from them were real. So meeting David and spending time with him made him that much more of an inspiration.
What did working with Brian Grazer entail for you?
Brian Grazer gave me the opportunity to produce a mainstream movie. It was my idea to do Nutty Professor. I was going to do it with Martin Lawrence. I wanted to do it for about $10 million or whatever. And he said, no, let's do it with Eddie Murphy. And I met with Eddie, and who I knew, and that it started there. But anyway, Brian, I didn't realize it. I was riding around in a go-kart, doing what producers do, right? And the guy from BET was interviewing me. He said, no African-American rides around in a go-kart and is producing mainstream movies, period. I mean, you could be a singer, or or you could be Eddie Murphy maybe and get a credit as an actor, invaluable piece. But just to ride around in the go-kart, just to orchestrate, to help to read the script and rewrite the script, to help to choose a director, to help to do the branding, the marketing, to oversee the soundtrack, to be the producer. There's no black people at all. And Brian Grazer didn't realize it, or maybe he did, but he enabled me, and I'll never, be thankful enough for what he did for me, for Nutty Professor 1, and paid me for Nutty Professor 2.
Tommy Hilfiger. What do you think happened where it didn't work out in terms of folding your kind of clothing or fashion business into his company? Because there was talks of that at one point,
we talked a lot. Tommy was such a great help to me and a mentor to me in fashion. And he really wanted to do something where we partnered. But, when you have a company the size of his, you don't want to lose. If you're going from 600 million one day, the next week you look at the projections, they're 720. You can't look at a company that takes so much work to get to 10. And so his heart was there. Lawrence Stroll and some of his partners' heart wasn't there. But he did so much for me. He helped me with distribution. He helped me with find sourcing and producing the products. He gave me so much. To this day, even now, Tommy Hilfiger is using my daughter as a model and really mentoring her. So I can never be thankful enough for his presence in my life. It's been a great ride. He is a great friend.
President Trump. I know you just spoke to him the other day.
Well, that was my man. That was my man. We did so much together. We traveled a lot. It was kind of like, today someone would say it was a toxic masculine bond. I flew to all of the Miss Universe I was a judge. That was one of the things we did. But we would go to Mar-a-Lago all the time. He would love to bring me to Mar-a-Lago, and he would say, look, I got Jews and I got blacks. But he loved that. Look what these wasps got to deal with. Country club like this with Jews and blacks. He would, that's my friend Russell, and tell everybody, right? Because there were no Jews and blacks in country clubs. So Donald Trump was, so proud to talk about all the Jews he had in his country club and the African Americans he let in. But that wasn't why he brought me, just to show me off. We would laugh about everything. He was crazy.
What do you think led the two of you to being close? Because at one point, you guys were talking like 2 or 3 times a day, I think.
I would talk all the time to Donald. We'd do all things. We had all kinds of fun stuff that we did together. I'd go to the fight with him. I'd go to his weddings. I mean, we were friends, and when he ran for president, unfortunately, I didn't think he was suitable for president. Instead I was surprised at the choice he was making that were polarizing us, and it hurt.
How did that impact the relationship?
Well, the minute he ran for president, I said I'd rather Kim Kardashian be president. I was on TV and said that. And he called my office and he sent over an article, and then he also wanted to ask if I said it. I mean, it's on CNN and it's also on YouTube, because they're both reality stars, right?
Yeah, right.
I didn't think either one was qualified to be president. And I said I'd rather her. Well, she's compassionate. We know she's not saying some of the things he was saying that were very hurtful, in my opinion.
What do you think of the job he did as president?
People will probably not like me for this. Of course, nothing he said is true about so many subjects. So, I mean, most things he said. He's a little bit of a narcissist. We all are. He's certainly proven to be that. He's really in a lot of trouble now for things that, rightfully so, he's in trouble. It's funny because, I've been a flaming liberal in someone's mind. But what I really was a real progressive. And I'm a compassionate, and I'd like to say, and progressive person. So every kind of equal right that we could give, I was always a gay rights activist. I was always a women's activist. So the Democrats have always been better in many ways on things that, a lot of the things I care about, mostly been better. My guru, in fact, said, you cannot be political. If you're a servant, then sometimes it's going to be political. And you should show up, whether it be to vote or to be an activist, or you're a servant, you have some things you're called to do.
How did Def Comedy Jam impact you in your career?
The first comedy we saw that was Def Comedy Jam like was Robin Harris, and we wanted to produce a show with him because it was not only his show that he had in Crenshaw, but it was all the clubs around the country where this new group of comedians were emerging. And so there were great comedians all over the country, undiscovered, that needed exposure. So we thought Robin Harris would be our host. Robin Harris, unfortunately, passed. So then I went to Eddie Murphy and asked him if he wanted to host it, and he recommended Martin Lawrence. And so that's how it got started. And, there was just a wealth of talent. There was a guy named Bob Sumner who was a town scout, traveled all over the country and brought these people to us. We would have these showcases, and I'd be amazed at how many great people came forward. Jamie Foxx and Cedric the Entertainer, and Bernie Mac, and Chris Tucker, and Dave Chappelle, and I could just go on, so many. Kevin Hart, and just so many. Tiffany Haddish, and all of these guys, Steve Harvey. Did I say Steve Harvey? There's so many that became giant stars after one performance on Def Comedy, because it was timing. It was, these people needed their exposure, and once people got a taste of it, and it became a cultural phenomenon, not just the comedy show that we produced, but the comedy, the thirst for it grew as there's so many talented people that were just driving the marketplace. We probably did over 150 episodes.
How did it impact your business?
The Def Comedy Jam kind of helped to reaffirm Def Jam's name. When Def Jam fell into deep debt, the name was so valuable that we were able to, and also some belief in us that we could come out of the hole. the name really meant a lot, and the company had cultural significance.
Trump helped reinforce the value of name to you, right?
What Trump did, and that's why it was Russell Simmons Def Comedy Gym, Trump said he bought the Tiffany building. And he's going to call it Tiffany. No, I'm going to call it Trump. And he talked about brand building, personal brand being more. So Trump kind of helped me with that, yeah. Def Comedy Jam helped to reaffirm Def Jam's significance. Because Def Jam was such a cultural space. I mean, imagine that. We managed Big Daddy Kane, and we managed EPMD at one time before we signed him, and Nice Smooth before we signed him. And we managed Tribe Called Quest and De La Soul and Eric B. and Rakim, and we managed everybody. And Def Jam was the centerpiece. They weren't on our label, but we were better at distributing and managing and branding, and we were the home. So all of those people are kind of they all wore Def Jam jackets. You're on another label, you're wearing a Def Jam jacket. You're cool. So Def Jam felt like the epicenter of hip hop culture. And so when we got into debt and the company wasn't doing so well, we were able to stay alive because the brand was so strong.
Selling your business. You said in the record business, companies that have deals like Def Jams with Sony always go out of business. Explain that.
Well, I mean, in my book, I said that it's true that they have a joint venture, they make money, they generally didn't own their masters back then. They just, owned 50% of the profits. And, they get cold, like Def Jam got cold, it was the end of it, right? They were gonna kill us, but the name was big enough. Our resilience was strong enough. And we were able to take the company, which was, I think, $13 or $14 million in debt. And we got like $30 million. We ended up with 17 in our pocket and another joint venture. But the catalog that they bought, because they bought it, was valuable.
What do you think you learned from going through that experience with Sony?
Well, Sony didn't want us, and Polygram did. And Polygram believed in our future, and Sony didn't. What I learned was, there's always another buyer. If you have something valuable, there's a buyer.
Your company was out of money at the time, and
we were broke. We were $13 million
offers.
In debt, and we found a buyer. I thought there was another buyer beside them, but we got them, and they paid a good number, and immediately the company caught fire. Right? So many hit records came after that, and the company started to really excel.
And why didn't the deal with them to buy the rest of the company work out, and how lucky are you that it didn't?
Well, we didn't really want to, and so we never pushed for it. We were building a company, and we were having fun, and we were funded, and we were successful. There was no reason to sell. DMX put out 2 albums in 1 year. Jay-Z was hot, Ja Rule. So we had Def Squad, we had Rockefeller, we had Rough Riders, we had all these labels, Outburst, we had Murder Inc. These are huge success stories on their own. And it was impossible to take just our LL Cool J, Public Enemy, whatever was on Def Jam, to the radio and those records. It was impossible. But each label had their own identity, and each label excelled on their own with us managing and nurturing the executives.
What would you say is your biggest professional success?
Well, finding Rick Rubin, finding Kevin Liles, finding Leo Cohen, finding talented people. I was surrounded by talent. Very lucky that God put these people in front of me and around me. And so I've always had more talented people than myself. This is where my success came from.
When I say Hip Hop 50, what comes to mind?
I mean, yes, I was involved in Jay-Z and Kanye and Beastie Boys and Run DMC and all in between. And I have a commitment to Hip Hop 50 to get the DJ Hollywoods and the Eddie Chibas and Love Bug Starskys, the masterminds. Before rap was a recording art, it was a performing art. So these great performers who made it so that we could record have not gotten compensation or credit. And I want to make that my mission for this year, that I'm a part of, not only through the Hip Hop Museum, but through everything that I do regarding Hip Hop 50, that I highlight the reason that we're here, the shoulders of the masterminds of hip hop that we stand on. It was fun working on producing Run DMC, you know, and my brother becoming a big star was a miracle and a lot of fun. And my first artist, Curtis Blow, we recorded that record. There were no rap records. So I was there from the beginning, and I've seen it. They're just not telling the proper story about the founding fathers of hip hop, or they're leaving some people out. And I think while people are still living, it's a crime not to tell the story accurately.
How do you do that?
I'll do it. I'll figure out ways. I got Snoop the other day, played Yankee Stadium. I had Snoop bring DJ Hollywood on the stage. Or Hollywood and Eddie Chiba being honored now by the Black Museum. I'm getting the messaging out that some of the guys who have been overlooked should be recognized.
Explain how you've used hip hop as a tool of education and enlightenment over the years.
Well, look, hip hop helped change all those laws, drug laws. Hip hop is a whole educational platform. There's some friends launching Hip Hop University. I'm helping them. Hip hop has, we used it in the summit. We had 10,000 people in Detroit, and Eminem was the host. In Houston was Beyonce, and all the cities, the stars. Nelly was in St. Louis. I mean, so we would have 10,000 kids come out, and we would teach people financial literacy, and we would also do anti-gang activity work with the hip hop community, and it was a fun experience. We did like 50 cities. And it was something that I was really inspired to do and lucky enough to help lead. I'm pretty old, I've been around and I've seen a lot. And hip hop has done a lot. So I've been on the ride, a carpet ride with these guys. And I'm very lucky for that.
When your career is looked back on, what would you like people to most take away from it?
Getting the 10,000 people out of jail, changing the drug laws, and God knows how many people wouldn't go to jail because those laws were changed. That was a moment that I will not forget. Other than that, just watching them all. I was watching the Bad Boys 1, and I remember managing Will Smith and launching Martin Lawrence, and I see them together. Like, wow. And I do that every day, all the time. I watch Steve Harvey and Bernie Mac and Dave Chappelle, and the launching of these people's careers and watching them do good. It's the ripple effect. The ones that became philanthropic and political and politics for the good of the collective, and the ones who really had an impact on the lives of others, I kind of secretly take a little credit for that. Like, I was there. This guy wouldn't be famous, wouldn't be able to do, So something like that. I watch Jay-Z, what an inspiration he is. I watch Kanye, and what a brilliant business guy he is. And Run DMC, Reverend Run, the preacher, he's still an inspiration in a lot of ways for people, as a preacher, even what he puts on Instagram, how he speaks to people. LL Cool J, what he's doing now to help all the underserved. The same thing I talked about Hip Hop 50, about artists who maybe not getting enough credit for the work that they contributed to the culture. And he has that Rock the Bells, and I watched him become a big TV star. And, I've seen people come from out the hood that might not have made it, that were not for the team around me and some of my efforts, they wouldn't be there, right? And there's a little bit of pride in that, a little bit of pride.
What are you like as a partner in marriage?
I must have been a partner of what I hear. No, I was very generous and tried to be supportive. We were together 15 years, Kimora and I. And for 8 years, we were married. Another 7 before that, we were back and forth. And then I was best friends with Kimora throughout the entire raising of my children. I'm the godfather to all 3 of her other children. I was good friends with Jaimin. I was good friends with this Tim Leisner. So I tried to be as flexible and as accommodating and supportive. And then, sometimes things don't work out. You've seen there's a lawsuit. I had no choice. I think Jesus Christ, Muhammad, Lord Buddha, anybody would have sued.
Why?
It's a lot of money, and it can help a lot of people. She gave what is now, today, based on the stock, $800 million to the government illegally. And now I'm fighting to get my half of it back. And it was in support of Tim, who, as you know, is a convicted criminal. And they stole I think it was $6 to $8 billion from the Malaysian people. And his bail was my stock, which had no right to be.
Kimura alleges that you didn't use any of your own money to buy the stock. You didn't use
Oh yeah,
any
not
of
alleges.
your
Tim paid for the stock.
own money
Tim bought the
to
stock.
invest in her investment company.
It was my company. Tim put money in my company and we bought the stock. It's obvious. The government will figure that out. It was mine. I found the company. I built the company. I reformulated the drink. I got LeBron and Kobe and Kim Kardashian and Puffy and everybody to promote it. It was nothing. And now it's worth $16 billion, right? And I was part of that process. In fact, it would never have existed if not for me. That's a fact. So I did the work and I owned the stock. And then one day they just took it behind my back and gave it to the government as his bail. And then it was only worth 60 or $70 million then. Plenty of money for me. I'm a billionaire. I live in Bali. It's cheap. I have what I have. I'm happy. The fact that it's gone up, ballooned up to 800 million is quite maybe I should thank everybody if, when it gets all resolved. But in the short term, there are people I can't help. There are philanthropic, social, and political concerns that I would normally help.
What are the steps that have to happen?
Well, I don't even go into legality. Yeah. Well, the government has now moved back and said they want to negotiate. They don't want to go to trial over it because they want to go to forfeiture. So they said they're going to negotiate. We hope that we can make a reasonable, I hate that I give them anything. I offered them 10% of my half. And then she's sitting on a bunch of it that she can't cash either. So the stock is totally at the mercy of the market, how much money it is. Mm-hmm. And it goes up sometimes what's equal to $100 million and down. I built this hotel thinking I had the stock too. So from a liquidity standpoint, it really put a crunch on me.
How so?
No liquidity. I can't go do a lot of shit. I didn't make rapper money like Kanye West. I was a different era. But I made enough. And yes, there's a liquidity crunch. It's there. It's not, I'll survive.
How does it affect you?
The only thing that affects me about this is my children being upset with me. I love them more than I love everything. And when my children have a narrative about me that is not accurate, and my children actually publicly say that I've been in some way not acted well, I've always been the one to hold space for them. They could curse me out, yell at me. They know that I love them unconditionally, that I cannot unlove them.
Because there was a period where they called you emotionally abusive. They thought you might be mentally ill.
Do I seem mentally ill to you?
I mean,
you never know what's in the back of my head. Maybe I'm crazy.
Right.
Well, when I first sued, I said, you illegally took my money and you criminally gave it to the government as bail. You misrepresented who owned it. And the response is, yes, some of the money is yours, but you've been abusive. Why am I the godfather to the 3 boys? Why did I go on every vacation with her and her husband just to be near my kids? And why did I continue to be the very best friend that she had? You can call anybody that's known us. None would agree with that narrative. None. So it's very hurtful. But you know what my job is? Not even to discuss it, really. There's nothing I can do to convince anyone, or nor should I need to convince people. I have not responded to any of the negative stuff in the media, the attacks, at all. Yesterday, you were with me when my daughter texted me. Tomorrow, I close on their new apartment, the 23-year-old and 21-year-old, to say that I'm the deadbeat when I paid $50,000 a month for 20 years and still pay. And I'm still signing a new lease for the 2 of them to live in Manhattan, so one can model and the other one can go back to school. When this settles, I'm gonna put a chunk of money in their account. They can tell both of us to off. That's the plan. I think that may be part of the reason we're not so quick to settle, because I would give them independence.
What steps do you take to avoid letting it just destroy you as a parent?
I meditate daily. I take my walks. I send nurturing and beautiful messages to them every day that I know that they digest. They send me back, I love you, thank you. And I accept that, and I haven't spoken publicly about this, I'm telling you this stuff, I accept that this may not be a good move. You know, the public spat you saw started when I said a mother should make it easy for a father to see a child. The day I sued her mother, they stopped following me on Instagram. That day. And that day, the mother said, you'll never speak to them again. And so I speak to them behind their back almost every day. And I still support them. But, you know, it's tough. They started to receive a different narrative and started to really be more difficult to manage my relationship with them. I think that they're old enough to know that their parents aren't perfect. Their mother loves them and their father loves them. And a dispute that we have will be resolved. They know I found and created and reformulated and branded and built that company. They know that I owned half of it. But I don't think it's up to them to judge or have to make any decisions about it. I did say when I said, could you tell your mother to call me? You're with her every day. You know what she did. Can you call her to the table? I can't unlove her, right? Much less unlove my children. So I know that it'll be resolved.
You still love your ex-wife?
Well, you know, I love what she's done for my children. I love the experiences we had together. And I know that she's suffering. Hurt people, right? And I know the beauty that's inside of her. I know that she knows she made a terrible mistake by giving this government the stock. And I know that she knows, as she said, even when she responded to the lawsuit, and I don't know why we're still fighting over it, because it would help a lot of people if we freed it up.
This morning, music mogul Russell Simmons stepping away from his businesses.
Russell Simmons, now the latest big name, left to defend himself.
9 women accused Simmons of a wide range of misconduct, from vulgar language to assault to 4 instances of rape.
What did he do?
He raped me right up against the wall. Excuse my language. But that's what he did. I had to keep this secret.
He showed up naked wearing a condom and tackled me to his bed while I screamed and fought and said no and cried. That's rape.
If the allegations are not true, why would all these women accuse you?
I heard someone else say this, you know, that I was quite frivolous. Look, there's a song by Houdini, I'm a hoe, you know I'm a hoe. 3 different girls after every show. Culturally, we thought that was the right way. And the number of sexual partners and compromising positions I put myself in is beyond anybody's imagination.
You said you had more foursomes than most men have partners.
Yeah, you know, and that wasn't really, I think it was cultural and silly and egotistic and sad and from an insecurity that feeds it, and a lot of reasons why we were that way. If you slept with as many people as I slept with, thousands, and we're talking about 6 people.
There were like 20, right? I mean, that ranged from
I spoke
assault
poorly.
to
You mean
rape
that's not, no. Yeah. I spoke poorly to 15 of them. I mean, 12 of them. I spoke poorly all the time. I'm a Def Comedy Jam guy. I was crude. So how many compromising situations was I in? And if you call that person and say, can you help me help these other women, then you can get them to tell a story and reimagine a story. And I'm not here to say what they were thinking, but I can simply tell you that I was in so many compromising situations that people can have a recollection from 30 or 40 years ago. And it can be different from my recollection. And it could be one where there was perhaps collaboration. If we had more foursomes than most guys had once, could someone leave and feel hurt? Could someone leave and feel they wish they hadn't? Could someone reimagine a story out of thousands of people? Could someone want notoriety in a market where people thirst for fame, even infamous? Could someone who just came out of jail and want to sue you because they had an experience and they can reimagine it just a little bit different? And could you be vulnerable enough to accept it? I took 9 lie detector tests. People don't know that. 9 separate. 7 from the chairman of the Polygraph Association. One for each of the serious accusations. One for when someone said, for instance, I was violent. One person said that. I've never been violent, took that. And one for I apologized. I never apologized about assaulting anyone. But if two people say it, because one said it and me too, and the second person said it, then I took a test for it. 3 hours per test by 2 polygraph examiners. One that I've never done this to anyone and one I've never done to each individual. Some people say that they're not accurate, but if they're 94% accurate, I did 9 of them. It's pretty clear that I don't believe it. I even asked well, what if I believe it, but it's not true? He said, your subconscious will get you. I said, I don't know how true that is, but that's what was told to me by the chairman of the Polygraph Association. He was filmed, by the way, talking about this, so there's footage available. No one in the mainstream would cover that.
Why do you think that is?
There's a narrative.
Which is what?
That we don't want to go backwards. We want to believe women. But women and celebrities may be in some cases a little different. But we don't want to not believe women. We have to believe women. We have to give them the benefit of the doubt, but we can't demonize people without proof either. Twitter cannot make a decision. I've never spoken to a policeman. I've never spoken to a judge about anything. So who's the judge and the jury here? Maybe you haven't lived in the real world. It's gray. No one's intentionally hurt anybody. It's a big difference. No one pushed anybody, and being pushy is different from pushing someone. It's very gray.
Rape is a strong allegation in some of these stories, or that you pinned women down. I mean, like bad stuff, either happened or it didn't, right?
Yeah, it's a serious word, but I think they've changed the meaning.
How so?
Because I've never been violent to anybody. The rape is a violent crime. So it is a very serious. Somebody jumps out of bushes and rapes somebody, it's different, I think. So it's a different kind of recollection. I mean, so I don't think anybody's saying I was violent. Of course, I've been insensitive, but certainly I've never been forceful in any of my relationships. All of what I've had has been consensual.
What errors in judgment do you think you made, looking back?
My goodness. We all need to learn to be better listeners, all of us. I think that the culture and the climate was different, and the way people interacted was different. And I think to judge 40 years ago as if it was today, we get in trouble. We have to accept where we were and move on and be somewhere else in the future if we don't like where we were. And I think that we're doing that now. And I think that's the good that comes from me too. And, I think this next generation should be more sensitive, and we should have a new way forward. And this is helping us to form a new way forward. It's a great movement. It's done a lot of great work for women. It's sensitized men in ways that they were not sensitized. And for that, I'm grateful.
If you had a do-over with that period, what do you think you would do differently?
A lot, but I don't have a do-over. This is the thing about practicing, being here now, and accepting what you learned and move forward. We can't do over. I haven't spoken to anybody for 5 years. It's ruined my life. It's ruined my relationship with a lot of everything. All my 5 charities have gone down. I had a lot of work. I had a lot of people I was trying to help. I had a lot of things I was doing, and I've been locked out of it. I don't want this to be the trigger to turn everything around again.
At some point, somebody's going to ask you about this, so why not do it in a controlled environment where
Is it
you
control? Are you going to Graham?
No.
All right,
So,
well, let's go.
Explain why November 23 is an important month for you.
Oh, well, they've had a year, the accusers, to sue me, and I haven't been sued. But I kind of believe that a lot of stuff's been the media. First of all, 40-year-old stories are quite hard to prove, I guess, but in civil suits, maybe not. But they're 40-year-old stories, but they've been covered by the media. But I can't speculate as to why I haven't been sued, but we're talking about 6 serious accusations.
What did you think of the doc?
I didn't watch it.
Why not?
Because it's not true. And I think that Oprah said the stories don't add up.
Oprah also came out and said she believed the women.
I stand in support of these women. I believe them. It was a hard decision because I knew that Russell Simmons had started publicly pressuring me, and that me pulling out of the documentary was going to look like I was being pressured.
How do you square the two?
Well,
her
she said she believed women, but if you want to call Oprah, I can give you her number. She made a movie about some women and then made it very public that she was making the movie and that she made the movie, and then she walked away. She has not come back in support. Isn't she a supporter of black women or not? You should call her. She will not defend those women. Those are black women that she said she supported. She will not defend them. She cried on the phone to multiple witnesses that she didn't even know, because she learned that hurt people, and that her stories, as an investigative journalist herself, she knows those stories should never have been printed, much less made a movie about.
What conversations did you and Oprah have during that process?
Well, the first thing I called her and I said, I'm glad it's you making the movie, because people rush to judgment, and you're a reporter. I said, well, have you spoken to anybody who was there at the time or around that time? And then she called them. She studied them. She read their books. And then that's caused her to walk away from the movie.
What she had said, just to be clear, on like CBS this morning was that she felt more time was needed, and
to make a whole
the
documentary, not about me.
Wouldn't.
She said to change it. She said to change the whole thing. Is what she told me. She told him she wanted to change the entire thing to a documentary about men in general, about the whole music industry, and that I couldn't be a subject anymore because she had found too much contradictory evidence about the stories about me. That's what she told them. And that's what you could ask her that. Everybody she interviewed, she taped. She taped about 20 witnesses. Those tapes are available. If you're investigating this, maybe you should dig into those tapes. I don't want to go far into this discussion because it is a very sad moment. It was the most traumatizing experience in my entire life. It hurt my children. There are people with 40 accusations, you'd be interviewing them right now, and this subject wouldn't come up. So I feel a little bit targeted, but please continue.
And I was going to say, to be clear, this is not an investigation. You have not really talked about this before, and so I was merely trying to get your thoughts on
well, I don't
this,
want to sound defensive, but yes, I told my children I would not speak about this. And it's been, because I left and I spent so much time here, people have assumed that I really left and ran, even though I'm back in America all the time. I'm behind the 8 ball. So I'm not expecting you to put yourself, make it look like you're wrong about anything or that you're in favor, but you have the tools. Please don't
you have the tools to provide context, and context in any story is everything.
Everything.
Yep. What have the past 5 to 6 years been like for you since 2017?
Well, I've written 4 books. I built a hotel. We have a talent agency that has 300 people working all around the world. And I live in Disneyland, yoga and vegan Disneyland. So God gave me a new lease on life and new things. Also a lot of self-reflection. How can I make that better? How can I be a better person? So I just got to accept that what I've been through is God's way of, refocusing me on being a better servant. These 5 years have been both a gift and a curse.
How's it been a curse?
Well, it's been a curse because I've been demonized in ways that, and I could never defend myself enough. There's no way you can defend yourself. So for me, I have to accept the scar that they've demonized me in ways that I don't see myself and people who know me don't see. And at the same time, I accept responsibility for having been insensitive. I've been a lot of things. never intentionally hurt anyone. I know people are hurt, but I didn't intentionally hurt anyone. And I was never told by anyone that such a thing occurred. People will decide whether you are a good or bad person, or bad or innocent or good, by their pain body and their experiences. That's what's going to decide how they feel about you, and you can't change them. And again, I have to live with the scar.